It's your two favorite hosts, Dr. Prince and Geo. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Geo Trip. It is exciting to be back. Very grateful to you, all old and new listeners that have chosen to rock with us. Today's episode has us talking to our esteemed guest, Dr. Veeshan Narinesingh. Veeshan was born and raised in the greater New York City metropolitan area. That's where his parents settled after they immigrated from Trinidad and Tobago. He has a bachelor's degree and a PhD in physics from the NYC Public College System, specifically the City University of New York. During his PhD, he was a fellow under the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, Educational Partnership Program with minority serving institutions, and later completed a postdoc as part of NOAA's Cooperative Institute with Princeton University. Dr. Narinesingh now serves as a federal scientist at NOAA Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory, where he specializes in atmospheric dynamics and weather extremes in a changing climate. V, as he is also called, also runs his own academic enrichment and consulting company called Scientists Academics, and is also a co-founder of Caribbeans for Climate, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization founded to empower and connect Caribbean people interested in climate change. Dr. Narinesingh, welcome to the show, and we cannot express just how pleased we are to have you joining us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm honored for you to even consider me for this. So, yeah, I'm ready to share my knowledge, I guess.
So, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your geo story, how you came to be a federal scientist at NOAA, and how did kind of having that connection to Trinidad and Tobago influence, if at all, your career choices?
Yeah, so it's actually a very non-traditional story because I became a climate scientist basically by accident. So let's see, I'll take it way back. So my parents, aunties, my uncles, my brother, and my sister, they all were born in Trinidad, grew up there, and then they moved to the United States, I guess, for better opportunities. And that's where I was born. So I was born in the Bronx, New York. I lived there for much of my life. And yeah, I guess growing up, I was always really interested in science, particularly physics, but I was also a very unruly kid. And I wasn't much interested in like doing really good in school and going to a top college or anything like that. I was just more out to have fun. I guess it's kind of a Trinidadian thing too. We like to have our fun and all that kind of thing, but was not very serious about school. And then when I went to college, I did not do so good at first. And then it took some real life events to happen to me for me to kind of turn it around and realize that I'm wasting a lot of opportunities, especially seeing how my parents grew up and where they came from, because I spent a lot of time in Trinidad growing up. Seeing where they came from and realize what they sacrificed to come here and create opportunities for us. And really, I was throwing it away. It got me to really turn around what I was doing. And then eventually I started getting serious about studying physics because that was always a passion of mine. And I didn't do so good at first in school, but I persevered and worked really hard. And eventually, I got into a PhD program to study physics at the same school that I did my bachelor's in. And the idea was I wanted to become an astrophysicist because that's what I was always interested in growing up, black holes, neutron stars, these types of things. But the issue was when I was in my PhD, I couldn't find a mentor to help me become an astrophysicist. So I said, okay, I guess I'll just do something where I can learn coding. That way I can get a good job and work at Google for a bunch of money. So I saw this opportunity with the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, where they were funding students from my school to pursue their PhD. And I knew it would open up some doors for me. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll just try this. And I guess the rest is history because I really fell in love with the field from that. it was basically physics, what I was doing, but just applied to very real world kind of relevant problems. And then definitely my identity as a Trinidadian American, Trinidadian person, member of the Caribbean diaspora was very, very important and influential to me. Yeah, just I spent a lot of time visiting Trinidad and staying there. And then with my family, my mom has 14 siblings and my dad has 9. And a good 50% of their siblings moved to the Bronx altogether. So I grew up around this big Trinidadian family. And I quickly realized that, not everybody has the same opportunity. And you can see that here in the US where, you look at minorities versus not minorities or rich versus poor. Not everybody has the same opportunities and access. That's a fact. And on the grander scheme of things, you see that within different nations as well. I mean, definitely there's more lucrative financial opportunities in places like the US compared to other countries like in the Caribbean or elsewhere in the world. So I guess ultimately what my connection from my culture made me want to help people. And that's what I saw growing up. Like everybody, I could go to anybody's house in my family's village and they would offer me food. So that kind of warm connectedness where you're looking out for one another and helping people, I felt like that really drove me to want to do something that's meaningful to society and to other people. And inspired me to want to become a scientist, I guess. That's a very long-winded answer, but I hope it answers the questions.
No, definitely no such thing as a long-winded answer here on the Geo Trip. But V, is it okay if I call you V?
Yes, of course.
Perfect. I feel like we're friends because of that story. So I do want to thank you for sharing your Geo story. I love that you included that you didn't initially start off as a STEL in STEM. You actually talked about the fact that you had low lights and you had to self-reflect until you found your path. So can you, with this path, explain for our audience in plain language what a climate scientist is or what your day-to-day looks like in regards to that part of your profession?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just give you an overview of the science itself. So I'm a climate scientist that focuses on the atmosphere and atmospheric dynamics and physics, basically. And for those not familiar, I'm sure, much people, especially Caribbean people, have been to the beach and seen the ocean. And just like the ocean flows and churns, so does the atmosphere. And just like the ocean has waves that can get stalled and can break, the atmosphere has analogs to these types of things. So when I first started studying climate science and atmospheric science, I found out about this stuff and I realized that this is really just physics that's applied in a different way than what I was used to. And it really got me fascinated with it, especially since I came from an optics background dealing with lasers and waves of light. So when I learned about this, I got very excited. And really what intrigued me was, how do these waves and these weather events behave in current climates? What are the physical drivers of them now? And then what will happen to them in the future? How will they change in terms of perhaps how the wind moves around or how things heat up? So this kind of thinking became very fascinating to me. How the waves behave, how the jet stream changes, how weather extremes changes, especially because it's so relevant to human beings. So that's what got me into it. And then to study atmospheric science, well, it's not like we can go in a lab and do experiments where we have other Earths we can look at or other planets we can look at with that have their own fluid dynamics going on. It's not like a lab where you're experimenting on mice or something like that. But the best shot we have at it is something called climate models. Now, climate models are really cool to me because they're basically like really fancy, high-powered video games where you can build whatever kind of planet that you want and look at how the weather and the climate evolves. So what the climate model does is it takes all the equations for the atmosphere. So if you think back to your physics class, you have Newton's laws, your conservation of energy, conservation of momentum, all these things. And the climate model takes all those equations and it solves it for you. And what's really remarkable is that you can use the climate model, or weather models are very similar as well. And they work really well. You can know what the weather will be like 2 or 3 days from now, which is very remarkable. If you go see these equations, you probably won't get mad at your weatherman or weather person ever again. But we can use these models and get a sense of what the weather might be in 2 or 3 days. Well, we can also do all kinds of cool things to these models, like take all the land off the earth and have an aquaplanet, or keep all the land and change all the sea surface temperatures. Or we can do very profound things like take our earth and increase the greenhouse gases and then look at how the extreme weather events change. So day in, day out, this is one aspect of my job. So 50% of my job for NOAA is messing around with these climate models, doing experiments where we're looking at how weather patterns change in the future. So for example, I've been looking at when you warm the sea surface temperature, how does the heat extremes change all over the world? So that's one aspect of it. So day in, day out, you can see me coding, analyzing some data, making plots, spending way too much time making pretty plots, explaining those plots, writing papers, presenting my work, things like that. But there's also another 50% of my job, and that has to do with diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. I give you an example. When we look at the population of the United States, we see that it's about 20% Hispanic, 13% Black. But then when we go look at our federal science workforce, we see that it's only like 6% Hispanic and 8% Black or something like that. So clearly there's a lack of representation of many people within the federal workforce, the federal science workforce. And one aspect of my job is also on the other side of things, trying to develop and lead initiatives to make a workforce that's more representative of the society that we serve. So I think I have the lucky privilege of tackling two of mankind's most greatest issues. One is climate change and the other is systemic racism.
I'm at a loss for words here. It sounds like the perfect job for you. So you talked about like building these models, right? And some they're kind of hypothetical. They're like, I could get rid of all of the land and have an aqua planet. And then you said as well, you could also increase greenhouse gases and you could mess with sea surface temperatures. Are those like closer to the realm of reality of what the planet is experiencing right now?
Yes, actually, it's quite remarkable because the lab that I work in essentially invented climate modeling. And we actually, one of our scientists that worked there for dozens of years, he won the first Nobel Prize in physics that was awarded to a climate scientist. His name was Suki Manabe. So he had some experiments that he ran with climate models back in the 70s and 80s and looked at when you increase greenhouse gases, how much might the Earth warm? And it's quite remarkable that even some of those studies that they did way back then in the 70s and 80s are still pretty accurate when we look modern day at how much the Earth has warmed since then. So yeah, it's I guess it is pretty crazy and very interesting and remarkable that all this works. But at the end of the day, it's physics, right? So it should make sense, we would hope.
Wow, V, I am like literally mind blown at this point because climate is such a polarizing topic. And I know Kyron just asked you to kind of talk about it in terms of what we're seeing now globally, but I'd like to bring it a little bit home if that's okay with you. Can we talk about some of the extreme weather events we're seeing in the Caribbean? And can you explain to our audience in plain language again, because we do have a very varied audience, why we will continue to see what we're seeing, and then also why, depending on your belief system as a scientist, some of this isn't as abnormal as we think it is. if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's pretty unequivocal at this point. Humans are causing the climate of the earth to change, and we're causing the earth to warm up. It's like I said, simple physics. If you have more gases in the air that trap heat, then the place is going to warm up. It's like putting a blanket over the earth. And unfortunately, and this is really something too that made me more interested in getting involved in climate. Unfortunately, the places that have contributed the least to climate change are the ones being affected the most. Places like the Caribbean. You know, you go and you look at some of the biggest emitters in the world. It's definitely not the Caribbean. And there, I guess we're seeing some of the most effects by it. So particularly if you look at heat extremes in the region, that has increased a lot in the past few years, and not just heat extremes over the land, but also in terms of marine heat waves. So we're seeing a lot of coral dying off, coral bleaching events happening more ubiquitously. We're seeing heat extremes over land. We're also seeing a lot of changes in rainfall patterns and even things like hurricanes. So we had this famous example just this year of Beryl, which was one of the earliest storms to ever form during hurricane season. And then it also took a trajectory that was very unconventional. So we're seeing storms form sooner. We're seeing storms take paths that they haven't taken before, and we're going to see more of them. So this year in particular is poised to be very devastating in terms of quantity of storms. A lot of that is driven by the earth warming up. So when you have a warmer ocean, for example, that's going to create more fuel for these storms to form in the Atlantic basin. And then if the temperature is warmer in the ocean and over land, then you're going to have more heat extremes. But, you know, we really focus on these heat extremes, and those are very important. But I would also point out, too, that just the normal everyday kind of weather that we get in the Caribbean is getting much worse. So it doesn't matter if it's a heat extreme, if it already feels like a heat extreme on a normal day. So more and more every day, you know, we have events that were maybe one time percentile type of events. Now they're maybe occurring at a 70th percentile kind of rate, or even a 60th percentile kind of rate. So the everyday kind of weather is becoming worse and worse and seeming more extreme like. And then we think about projections of the future. It only seems like it's going to be getting worse in the Caribbean. So basically where it's dry, it's poised to get more dry. And where it is rainy, it's poised to get more rainy. And Trinidad in particular, I just went there in March, and I was just blown away because it was the first time I ever went there during dry season. Usually I would go in summertime because that's when school was off. But I went there during dry season, and I'm driving down the highway with my cousin, and the whole middle of the highway is on fire. And I'm like, bro, the highway is on fire. Like, this is not crazy to you? And to him, he just brushed it off because it was like a normal thing to him, the bushfires and all this type of thing. And what's really scary to me is that when you look at climate change projections for the future, it seems like that region in particular will get more and more dry. And then to make things even worse is that there's not a lot of studies that focus on the region. And then also because of the nature of how small the islands are, it's really hard to get a confident sense of how well our models are capturing the region. So there's definitely a lot of work to be done. It's definitely getting worse and worse. And at this point, you know, there's probably not much that people in the Caribbean can do to stop climate change because we're not the ones causing it. But I think at this point, it's time to buckle our seatbelts and make sure that we're adapting in the right ways. And hopefully, you know, the big polluters can really curb things down for the rest of the earth to be safe.
You have just spit so much facts, for lack of a better phrase, and a lot of it is really resonating with me. As someone who actually grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, I will just use it as the example island because I like to speak to what I know. I do want to confirm, so bushfires or brush fires happening during that dry season, aka summer period or July, August holidays, they were definitely a norm. However, we're seeing the intensity of it definitely increasing the frequency and the area that it's covering. And then just another highlight to tie in for my non-STEM followers or our non-STEM followers. As a masquerader, I can no longer be on the streets of Port of Spain on Monday and Tuesday the way I used to when I was 19, 20. I mean, the sun is literally burning into our skins. And the reason I mention it or I'm thinking about it is because as we start thinking about the future and adaptability, just from anywhere from professional, academic, or scientific and social, we are going to have to change. So that brings us to my next thought. Climate modeling has done such a remarkable job of replicating the problems that we're facing on our planet. Do you think, or can you show us how modeling is also presenting us with some potential solutions to address the issues we're facing?
This is a really nice question because this is like one of the next frontiers of the climate modeling community, which is geoengineering. So I'll give you one example of some of the things some people in my lab are working on, which is called marine cloud brightening. So one proposal to combat climate change is to throw more sea salt aerosols over the tropical Pacific Ocean, because if you do that, it'll create more clouds over there. And then when you have more clouds, you'll reflect away more sunlight. Therefore, you'd hopefully have a cooling effect from it. So some people in the lab are doing some experiments where they're configuring climate models to have more of these sea salt aerosols and generate more cloud to see if the temperature change is less. But it's not so simple though, because you can have more clouds over the Pacific and you have more radiation being reflected out. But also it could have some sort of other indirect effects elsewhere in the world. So you might do that in the Pacific, but create more rain in the Caribbean or more rain over really rainy areas in the US or elsewhere in the world through teleconnections. So this is one way that people are experimenting with looking at climate change from a geoengineering perspective. There's a lot of other ones as well. A lot of it focuses on having some sort of clouds injected to reflect away more sunlight, but also some of it is look at putting more aerosols high up in the atmosphere to let less light through, essentially. So it's very exciting, but also kind of scary that people are thinking about this. And it brings up a lot of questions about ethics and how do you let people proceed with these kinds of geoengineering strategies?
Which brings up a question that's been plaguing me. And so two things, actually. If we could pause for a second, because we do like to do a plain language approach. If you can explain to our audience members what exactly you mean by sea salt aerosols. And then my second question is, because something you said a little bit earlier where we talked about the Caribbean and these underrepresented populations are the ones that are being most impacted by these big polluters. I do want to ask, and for myself and our audience, how much of this modeling is then focused on those who are most impacted, those of us who live and reside in the Caribbean and so forth?
Yes, so I'll start with the sea salt aerosols. So sea salt aerosols, I'm sorry I use this maybe crazy sounding word, but it's really simple. In the water of the ocean, it's salty, as everyone knows. And then when the waves break and you get that foaminess, it flings salt into the atmosphere. And then that salt in the atmosphere gets transported all around the globe. It gets transported high up in the atmosphere. And that salt is considered an aerosol because it's a salt particle that's suspended in the gas. So that's what I mean by sea salt aerosol. Is that more clear now?
Oh, definitely. I just wanted for our audience members who are not necessarily familiar with the term, just to get a better understanding of what we're talking about. Because part of our focus here at the GeoTrip is making our community inclusive.
Yes. Okay. Of course. And sorry again for using big words there. So, and then the other question was how much of these studies are focused on the Caribbean? Be honest with you, not much. So definitely there's some great people out there in the Caribbean doing great work. I mean, there is a lot of work being done, but maybe not much is the right word, but not enough is the right word. There's some great work being done out there at the University of West Indies, Mona, at other places like the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology in Barbados. But definitely not enough is being done. And the access to the same level of resources and high performance climate modeling is not the same from country to country. So in the US, for example, the climate models and the computer systems that I have access to as a federal scientist, I'm working with computers that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But in the Caribbean, there's simply not access to these kinds of resources and materials out there. So yeah, one big issue is the computational resources that are available to people down there, because not only do you need these state-of-the-art climate models, but you also need them to run at very high resolutions. So we're talking about resolution of like 1 kilometer, 10 kilometer, because that's the scale of the weather that occurs in the Caribbean. But currently, the models that we're using only have resolutions of about 100 kilometers. That is a big issue. But, with what we're doing within my community and other people that I know, my friends that are also scientists of Caribbean descent, we're just trying to get more and more of our people in the scientific realm to be doing the work, because if no one wants to pay attention to us, then we just have to do it ourselves.
So it's this saying my grandma used to say that cockroach and no place in fall party. Basically, it's like, the little guy, when the big guy's doing their thing, kind of gets stepped on, right? And I can't help but think about that in the context of what's happening in the Caribbean. As you mentioned that we aren't the ones that are, driving a lot of this effect that we're seeing, but we're experiencing an outsized impact. So while we may not be able to like geoengineer, do you have any suggestions for, the people from the Caribbean that might be listening in terms of how they can, just make themselves, their homes, their communities a little bit more climate resilient?
Yeah. So this, I just preface this by saying this is my naive outsider's point of view as someone who did not grow up there, but still as a member of the community and diaspora that has spent a lot of time over there and interacted with the people over there a lot. So, I think first off, there seems to be a lot of political challenges, that's for sure. But just make sure that you're going out, you're educating yourself, and you're voting for the right kind of political figures that have positive policies towards climate adaptation and want to do something about that. So I think that's the first most important step. And I think this is a very difficult one too, but just paying attention to the types of materials that you're using for building. When we think about Beryl and the effects on Jamaica, more developed parts of the island weren't affected as much. But when you saw the areas where there was complete devastation, it tended to be in more poorer communities where you have these galvanized types of roofs and these kinds of configurations. So advocating for better materials and services, I think that is really important. But I think it starts at the ballot first and foremost. Also in the classroom, we need to get ourselves out there, educated, and spreading that information into our community.
Okay. And I think this is a wonderful place for you to tell us a bit more about your work with Caribbeans for Climate.
All right, great. So this is what I've really been itching to talk about. So Caribbeans for Climate. Now, Caribbeans for Climate kind of came about as a chance kind of thing. So a couple of years ago, I got invited to give a talk at Purdue University. And as an academic, when you get invited to go talk at a university, the way it goes is you give your talk, and then the rest of the time you give your hour-long seminar, and the rest of the time you spend meeting different people that work there. And all these people signed up to meet with me. I didn't really have a clue who much of them were. And I saw that I had this meeting with this person, and I go in, and it was the first time in my life that I've met a Black woman with a PhD in meteorology. And her name was Jordan Jones. And I was talking to her, and then I realized that she's also a Caribbean person. So she's from Jamaica, and she did her PhD over here, her postdoc, and now she's about to take a faculty job. So Jordan and I were talking, and the talk came up about There's these studies of people that sometimes look at the Caribbean or India or these other places. And at the end of the day, they're just trying to make a name for themselves, build a career, but they're not from these places and they don't necessarily care about the people that are from there. They don't even cite them in the literature. We said, you know what? Enough with this crap. If they don't want to include us at their table, we're just going to make our own. So that's what we did. We kind of said, let's just do it. Let's just create a community where people from the Caribbean can be empowered. People that are from the Caribbean who are already studying climate science and climate change. Let's find more people like us. Let's connect one another. Let's celebrate the work that we're doing. Let's amplify our voice. Let's make some noise. Let's get together. Let's have some fun. Let's celebrate our culture and who we are. And then for the younger generation, the college students down there, the high school students, how can we connect with them and empower them to take climate action, to go to school and study climate science and then become scientists themselves and bring this knowledge back into their communities? So really, some of the biggest points of it were, first of all, celebrate our culture and the work that we're doing and amplify our voice, but then also to empower the next generation. So Jordan, we had this idea. We talked to our friend Gabe about it. Gabe Rios, who's a PhD student at Princeton University and one of my good friends. We told him about it. He's Cuban American. And then we started Caribbeans for Climate. It started off with just like some simple Zoom calls where we had some networking sessions. We did some panels. We did movie screenings online. And then eventually we said, you know what? Let's continue to take a chance. And we had a nice big Caribbean fete last year at AGU in San Francisco. And that was a big hit. And fast forward this year, endeavors, and we just started. Yeah, it's only been like a year since we started. This year, we actually won our first grant a couple weeks ago. So we're really excited about that. And our plan is to continue doing what we do. So we have more online engagements and networking opportunities for people to come together and learn, but then also some more in-person engagements. So this year at AGU, we'll be doing our Caribbean Fed again. And then also we'll be holding our own session that's focused on climate change in the Caribbean. And that's really exciting. So we have 15 abstracts for that. And we're waiting to hear if it's going to be an oral session or a poster session, but we're very excited to continue to bring the community together.
Man, I love that, V. That's super exciting. Aside from me now thinking how Karen and I are going to get FET invitations for AGU this year, because GeoTrip will be there, I also wanted to ask a quick question, if you didn't mind.
Yeah.
So for those of us who are interested in climate, atmospheric science, some of the great things that y'all are doing over there at Caribbeans for Climate, how do we get in touch with y'all? What's the how can we volunteer or be a part of the organization or contribute? Can you tell us a little bit more about that, what that looks like?
Yes, it's very easy. So, and I know this is a controversial point, but it's Caribbeans with an S, caribbeansforclimate.com. So if you go to our website, there's a page over there that you can click that says join our community, and it brings you to a Google form. So you just fill that out and it'll ask you some questions, and then that'll put you on the mailing list. And then once you get on the mailing list, periodically, like every other week, we'll send out updates. So over the summer, we've been on kind of a hiatus. So when you go to our website and you see it hasn't been updated in a couple months, don't judge us. We're going to be back soon. We've just been on our summer hiatus. But go on that website, go caribbeansforclimate.com. Click that button, join our community, fill out the form. That'll put you on the email list. From that, you'll get all the events, invitations to all the events. So usually for the online events, they're on Zoom. So we'll send you a calendar invite. We'll send out email blasts. And then in those blasts also, we'll be sending you a bunch of opportunities. So be on the lookout for that. And you could also follow us on social media. So on Twitter, it's Caribs for Clim on Twitter and Instagram. And then we're also on LinkedIn as well, Caribbeans for Climate.
Oh, perfect. And we'll also do a recap once we're closing off. The last question of the day, V. I mean, you've just provided so much insightful information, but I do kind of want to make the last question a little bit fun before we jump into Volcanic Vault. You mentioned that the website is Caribbeans with an S. Can you tell us how y'all came about with the name of the organization, please?
Yeah, so we really wanted a name that, I know this is going to be a controversial point because some people refer to the Caribbean region as the Caribbeans, and that's not right. That is just sounds weird, and you should not say that. But in this context, we're using the word in a different way. When we say Caribbeans, what we mean is Caribbean people. So we are Caribbean people from all the islands. No matter what language we speak, all Caribbean people united. Whether you live there, whether you live abroad, all Caribbean peoples united, Caribbeans for climate. So in this sense, we're not using it in this controversial way. We're using it just to refer to us as a whole community, all of our people.
Right. So to wrap things up, we come to a segment known as Volcanic Vault, where we hit you with some quick fire questions and you tell us the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's go. Which oceanic body is the warmest?
Which oceanic body is the warmest? Man, this is definitely not my field of expertise, but I probably have to say like the equatorial Atlantic area. Pacific, depending on if it's El Nino.
No, it is the Indian Ocean at a whopping 72 to 82 degrees.
Oh, okay. Okay, you got me.
Just to allow you to redeem yourself in Volcanic Vault, quick fire, first answer comes to mind, favorite city, Manhattan or Port of Spain?
Ooh, I mean, it's got to be Manhattan for me. Port of Spain definitely has a big place in my heart, but Manhattan is truly where I'm from, so I got to go with New York City.
Represent. All right.
You broke my heart, V.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Another tough one for you. How many major storms or hurricanes have severely impacted Trinidad and Tobago in the past century?
Oh man, you people came with some really. They might have to take my PhD away from me after this.
I'll give you a hint, because we're fellow countrymen, you know. Yeah. It's a number somewhere between 1 and 10.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking it's probably not a lot because Trinidad is so south. I would say maybe like 3 or 4.
Actually 10. Actually 10.
Oh, it's actually 10. Okay. Wow. Got to look that up.
He said he's going to quality control you. So, with that being said, so you've admitted Manhattan's your favorite city. You have a little stronger allegiance to the U.S., but you love Trinidad and Tobago. So, for a taste of Trinidad and Tobago on the East Coast, are you a Ali's Roti Shop or a Trin City Roti Shop?
I mean, at the end of the day, I'm going with neither. I'm going to my mom's house and I'm letting her cook me a nice dal puri with some curry duck and some curry goat with some chana and aloo. So yeah, those places are both very good, that's for sure, but they're not touching my mom. But I'm gonna have to go with Trin City. When I'm in Queens, I'm gonna have to go with Trin City. The doubles there is very tasty.
So all I'm hearing is when I'm on the East Coast next week that I can try to get an invitation. Perfect.
Yeah. Come through.
Right. And we've been treated to some wonderful nail-biting basketball games recently. USA, France. I'm looking at you. But for you, is it going to be Nets or is it going to be Knicks?
Well, it's gonna be Knicks all day. I don't know where they came from, but it's Knicks. That's always been New York's basketball team. And yeah, we're from the gutter. They really represent what the city is all about, working hard, especially in recent years. So that's without question. Just like it's clear that humans have caused climate change, it's clear that the better team in New York is the Knicks.
Yo, to any Nets fans out there, I'm sorry he said what he said. We're going to stand by it. All right. And I know that we have only touched the tip of the iceberg here today, but of course, we want to let you know that you have an open invitation to return. We love amplifying our colleagues' amazing professional and social accomplishments. And as we close out, could you let our listeners know one more time where they can connect with you and the Caribbeans for Climate organization?
Yes, so you can, if they'll have my name on there. So you just look me up online and you'll find my Instagram, Twitter. I'm pretty active on there. So, and LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to me on there. And then for Caribbeans for Climate, best place is our website, caribbeansforclimate.com. Click that Google form, join our community so we get your information and we can put you on the mailing list. And don't be a stranger. If you're a member of the Caribbean diaspora, or even if you're just an ally and you want to do something to help the region, to help the community, everybody wants to hang out with Caribbean people because we're fun to be around. Feel free to hit us up. So one love for that. That's for sure.
Perfect, V. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure having you here on the Geo Trip. Listeners, on behalf of Kyron and myself, thank you for tuning in to another exciting episode of the Geo Trip. But if you want to keep the conversation going, contact us. Do you have questions about geoscience? Do you wonder why some natural disasters are occurring more commonly? Are you trying to better understand oil and gas and how it impacts your economy? Or just curious about how the physical world works? Send us your questions and we'll do our best to unearth the answers you seek. Tweet us at GeoTripPod. Email us at thegeotrippodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget, geoscience is everywhere around us. So next time you're outside, take a look at the sky, the ocean, and everything in between. There's a whole story there just waiting to be discovered. See you on the next episode of the